Today we're going to cover the 10 best Misty Step builds that make use of every single amulet possible except for one. There was only one amulet I just could not make a really good build out of, and we'll talk about it for a bit at the end of the video. But before we check these out, let's go over a few things. First off, here is the prism I was working with while crafting these builds. I did get a legendary at the very end of recording finally, but it was max out core traits and not really all that good. So use what you've got and they should perform very similarly. Also, what exactly is Misty Step for those who don't know? This is a unique short-range teleport of mist that happens when you wear the Ring of Omens and any of these amulets on screen now. They have to have this moon symbol that's on top of the Ring of Omens, and that's all it takes. This grants infinite stamina for dodging because it will instead cost health. It can't ever actually end you by itself unless you use gray health items to your advantage. You can also use one of the fastest dodges in the game with our favorite heavy armor Leto Mark 1, which means all of these are going to have high defense, high life regen or lifesteal, and incredible survivability for base game or boss rush mode as well. With all that out of the way, let's check out good old Misty Step in some of the best ways possible. First up on the list for today, we have the Giga Sniper. This makes use of Hunter as prime for much more damage out of weak spots. Warden is the subclass for defense and shield while also offering 25% more damage in general. The Tranquil Heart is important so that passive healing always stays active under our shield. Now the main focus of this build is the monorail rifle. Basically how this works is you always run supercharger on it to keep it firing fast enough, and it does enough damage to wipe the floor with bosses. Do be aware that you should never fully charge the gun unless its mod is active. This grants you a much larger window to fire before it explodes and drops you instantly. Our amulet will be Death's Embrace, offering 25% more damage and haste when your health is below 50%. This is incorrect, however, as in-game it actually offers 30% more damage. You can check the symbol in the top left of your build screen. So amazing damage buff on top of haste all the time, because we're also going to wear the Restriction Cord ring, keeping us at half health. This ring also grants more defense, which is a very strong amount of DR actually. Ring of Flawed Beauty is a massive boost in damage for ranged weak spot, which this build is for. It does work without weak spot, but really you're pulling it out when they're available, otherwise it's more of a pain than anything else. Black Cat Band does actually prevent you from dying if you charge the gun too long. Very handy for boss rush runs where you try to hold just a tad too long for a juicy shot. And finally, we have Ring of Omens, which will be in all these builds as it grants the Misty Step effect. And that's really it. You've got enough defense to rarely go down, even with only half health. Your damage is just ridiculous on bosses with a good weak spot, and Misty Step will be healed up using our passive healing. Do be aware that on the sidearm I have Tremor for crowd control. Feel free to swap it with Bore at times as that creates a weak spot and doubles the gun's damage right now. I didn't use it for testing purposes, but it can quite literally double your damage as Monorail has punched through and hits the enemy twice with Bore. Kinda crazy, but also hard to hit at times as well. And yeah, this gun could do some insane one-shot stuff with Invader and all that, but this gives very consistent high damage without risking too much. We're going to bring back one of the fan favorite guns with the Shady Ninja. You want Hunter as prime again for more weak spot damage. Gunslinger will be the subclass for range damage and an increase to reload speed. Profane Heart is always one of the best options with lifesteal builds, but I chose Shielded Heart as it could save you at times and we honestly have enough lifesteal already. Nightfall is the focus here, specifically the mod on Nightfall. It grants a ton of lifesteal, making it nearly impossible to go down if you're firing at a target. As long as you keep that mod up and regenning fast enough, there's your lifesteal right there. Full Moon Circlet will grant us 25% more range damage with 3% more lifesteal from range damage. Leaking Gemstone allows you to regen your mods while they're active, meaning sometimes you can leave that shady realm and instantly re-enter. Very handy. Anastasia's Inspiration grants haste, which is very important. When you don't boost fire rate, Nightfall performs poorly, so this with a bit of life regen grants 10% more to all your actions. Seal of the Empress can be swapped out for Zania's Malice for damage purposes, but I felt the extra health gave me more room to work with when lifestealing my health up to full. The idea here is to use Nightfall and just spray that gun as fast and as often as you like. When inside that shady realm of blue from its mod, you're going to lifesteal instantly back to full health and will be granted infinite ammo. In boss fights, this is kept up because you're always hitting the boss. In some of the open areas or dungeons though, there isn't always going to be something to shoot, preventing us from regenning the mod quite as fast. Use Enigma, your sidearm, to clear away hordes quickly alongside the Shielded Heart if things get real hairy. An incredibly safe way to play as your damage is very high and consistent against every boss in the game. Nightfall is fun as heck, and this build gives you one of my favorite ways to maximize its potential. Let's start off by saying this Immortal Summoner build is way more fun than I could ever imagine. It uses Summoner as prime so we can shoot the flyers, making them deal more damage. Then we have Warden for shield, keeping us alive. Yes, the Warden class does have a turret drone as well, but he's not the best option for this specific amulet we're using. Then we want the Tormented Heart, as it is the only heart which can deal damage on its own. The way this one works is you summon your drone and 2 flyers. Shoot the flyers so they go into a rage, and then walk around using your Tormented Heart, exploding enemies around you. This grants insane lifesteal, but be sure to only use 5 relics at a time. Saravine Keepsake works similarly to Medic's Prime perk. Relics used will be granted back to you, but only 5 of them at a time. After that, you need to wait 30 seconds before they all come back. Any extra relics used are lost, and you want to save them in case you need to revive or take one at the last second to save yourself. The Generating Band grants health regen when shield is active, which you will always have shield up. Remember, Warden as a class grants you shield when you use a relic. Soul Shard grants 15% to all damage from our 2 flyers, and Drone being active. Burden of the Destroyer buffs all our damage, and then the Ring of Omens grants us our Misty Step. The 2 best mods I've found for summoner builds are Familiar and Space Crabs. Familiar is actually really good, and with the Maelstrom Mutator on Sparkfire, you can keep him pecking all the time. So kind of a mess on the surface, but everything works together really well. Summons are going to be your main source of damage, with the relic exploding for around 900 damage at a time. Use it to heal your summons over time and keep them safe, with the explosions having really strong stagger. Warden grants you constant shield, so you're always regenerating health, letting Misty Step never have you low in that department. And while waiting 30 seconds for your relic isn't the most ideal, it does mean you have infinite relic charges even in a 2-hour long boss rush run. Only thing I hate is that Summoner as a class is one of the weakest. You're not gonna see anything as cool as Monorail weak spotting for 80k damage here, but I personally refuse to use Summoner as prime, and this actually made it work. Particularly good if you just want to make use of this amulet or are looking for something different to try out. Also, space crabs are really fun, and no one's gonna argue with that. This build I like to call the Misty Mechanic. You want Engineer as prime for the impact cannon and overclock damage. Warden as a subclass will give us shield to protect our gray health. We'll then have the Gossamer Heart on, making it easy as possible to dodge, and you can't really take relics with the heavy weapon in hand anyway. Shielded Heart does work instead if you don't like this one though. For this one, we're using gray health to boost our damage, and in my opinion, this is the single best dodge in the entire game. You're also not going to be at 100% gray health for those who worry about that. And oh yeah, infinite ammo in the cannon is pretty great. Canine Keepsake grants 25% to all damage and 15% extra crit chance and damage. We're going to keep this active by dodging with the Misty Step in combat, lowering our health to gray health on dodges. Ring of the Damned grants more damage while gray health is active. Ring of Ordnance regens all Narud tech, so you have infinite impact cannon ammo and more shield incoming from the drone. Then the Atari booster grants more crit chance and damage to the heavy weapon, with Ring of Omens making our dodge Misty Step. What's really cool is Misty Step actually works when you have the turret in hand. Stack Engineer's already better dodge with Misty Step and the Gossamer Heart, and you have the best possible dodge you can get. Impact Cannon alone deals enough damage to beat any boss, and when groups swarm you, you plop it down for AoEs to keep you protected. Not only that, but this build has life regen built into it. You do want to stay at least half health as gray, but with life regen, you can actually keep some of your health bar there just in case. It means you don't need the Paper Heart to regen your gray health in boss rush mode, and it lets us never put the cannon down if we don't want to. Oh, and I almost forgot, do take the fitness trait so your dodge is even further improved. I found this build to be way more fun than expected. Misty Step on Engineer is unlike anything you've ever experienced, and like this, it's almost unfair. For those who missed the good old Root Doctor setup, I now give you the Hound Healer. We have Medic as prime for unlimited relics and extra healing efficiency. Handler will be the subclass, allowing us to buff the entire team's damage and take enemy aggression away from them as well. Resonating Heart will grant us a giant boost in healing, making you unable to die from almost any source of damage as long as this is active. Now, this is a team-based build, but it can work in solo play as well if you use Bleed to negate Empathy. Empathy is one of the affixes that's going to heal the boss on relic usage, but Bleed reduces that amount of healing. Still never going to be the best for those situations, but it can work. Red Dosage grants us the highest amount of healing efficiency we can get out of our relic. Burden of the Divine takes your healing and grants a portion of it to allies. Don't wear this one solo as it reduces your damage, but really good for team play. Seal of the Empress grants 20 more health, which we have infinite stamina to negate that one downside. Burden of the Robust increases health by 10 and armor by 20. Be sure to pay close attention to those traits I pulled up, as not having Rugged or Blood Bond means the dog is gonna die in seconds. Also, Glutton makes the build way more fun to play in general, general. And this is my new root doctor setup. My original version is very old, being one of the first builds I made when Remnant 2 first released. Now this, the Hound Healer, feels perfect. Especially if you have a decent prism, there's no chance you're dying, and the Handler grants enough damage to actually get you through fights, or support the team better than you ever could. The one thing to make note of is relics are only unlimited as long as you take damage. You need to actually heal for relics to recharge. So sit inside spots where you know you can eat those attacks, and don't be afraid of it. Take your relic every 20 seconds or so, and the game has never been any easier than this right here. If empathy does rear its angry face at you, swap to the Tranquil Heart for an easy fix and try not to actually tank anymore. Oh, and the repair tool heals allies, so that has to be here, of course. If you want absolute power, then the Big Booms build will give it to you. We have Archon for more mod power and damage. Ritualist is there to greatly boost our status damage and offer up the Death Wish skill. Profane Heart is going to be important, as with damage this high, you're going to instantly heal from hitting the enemy. The tricky thing about this build was I couldn't stay alive. In fact, I was exploding so much that even the kinship trait could not save me from my own damage. A weird problem to have, but I did find one item to fix that. Talisman of the Sun greatly boosts fire and burning damage. Stone of Malevolence grants infinite mod regen with Aphelion as long as you shoot the orb you're sending out. Red Ring of Death doubles our really high fire damage, and Tear of Lydusa was the key. This is going to boost both healing and lifesteal efficiency by 20%, now allowing us to heal up Misty Step damage with life regen and do enough lifesteal against bosses when Death Wish is active. Now the problem with life regen is that when Death Wish is active, that skill negates all active healing. But the thing is, the skill gives you more lifesteal, so you can heal through that instead. And when it runs out, you're not going to be as vulnerable if you have a little bit of healing. Kinship is absolutely required, as it helps keep Death Wish in check and stops you from exploding yourself. Which, I mean, our weapons are Aphelion and Starshot, the two biggest team/self deletions in the game. With Stone of Malevolence though, they're always going to be active, as Aphelion regens itself if you shoot the orb before it lands on the target. And the fire damage from both is outrageously high. I would, however, recommend not taking Amplitude to boost the radius of both damage sources, as it becomes impossible to avoid your own damage. Could that be a skill issue? No, it's actually just impossible because of how Aphelion works. Don't play this with a team, but for solo runs you can burn, as enemies get sent flying from your infinite explosions. For my friends who love ranged builds, we have the Warped Hunter. Hunter as primal grants us more weak spot damage and the Shroud skill. Invader as secondary offers more range damage, and Wormhole for plus 300% more damage on certain shots. The most fun skill in the game if you grab skill cooldown perks during the boss rush mode. Profane Heart is a must for the extra lifesteal, and the name of the game is Spore Bloom, a high-powered shotgun that hits like a truck. Full Moon Circlet will grant us 25% more range damage with an important 3% more lifesteal. Akari Warband offers more crit chance and damage on perfect dodge, which by the way, Wormhole counts as an automatic perfect dodge. Every teleport grants you this buff, so really handy. Nightmare Sigil boosts lifesteal on perfect dodge, which you can tell works almost immediately. A full heal from one Spore Bloom shot is pretty cool. And then we need Point Focus to reduce the enormous reticle that Spore Bloom has. Otherwise, you're never going to hit anything with optimal damage. Having just Bloodstream and Triage for traits will keep your gray health healed up from Misty Step, and the lifesteal gives you full health almost every time you fire the shotgun. Refunder on the Corrupted Rune Pistol solves the ammo problem all shotguns have. So in a single shot, you could potentially deal 14,000 damage. Spore Bloom's mod can be shot out to grant you haste, improving its reload if you stand in the cloud. And 2 teleports on hand makes dodging almost too easy. The only issue you might have is Spore Bloom is a shotgun, and shotguns don't do well against certain bosses. Mainly ones with a hard to hit weak spot who move around too much. Nightweaver is a great example, but you can absolutely crush elites, aberrations, and any boss who lets you get those shiny red numbers. If you can get away with it, Tranquility Font for your concoction will help the reticle shrink even more for more reliable damage. But for me, health is hard to give up on Misty Step builds since that's what they're built around really. If you've really been wanting to use Invader but hate the usual squishy setups, here's something that can get hit and keep on moving. I will warn you ahead of time, Bleeding Storm is a full-on bleed build, and the developers really killed bleed in the second DLC, making all the enemies and bosses over there immune to it. So you have to keep that in mind because this entire build idea just doesn't work in that DLC. This was a terrible idea by them, but that's not the point of this video, so to the build we go. Gunslinger as Prime grants us much better ammo economy for our main gun, as well as boosting its reload speed. Ritualist will be our secondary for more status damage in general. Tranquil Heart is great because we're going to be doing more life regen stuff here. Merciless is the main main gun as it deals bleed automatically and has a mod that can easily support you when needed. Ravager's Mark increases all damage to bleeding targets by 20%, 30% if they have low health. This item is why this build sucks in the second DLC. You lose half of the build right here if things are immune. Anastasia's Inspiration grants haste, as we do have passive healing. Dread Font grants 2 gray health regen per second, which counteracts Misty Step enough to give you more freedom on dodges. Then Offering Stone is a nice boost to all damage when you deal range damage. This means it's going to boost your gun and the status as long as you keep the bullets moving. The nice thing about this build is it's really easy to play. You've got status to help you take down targets over time, your range damage is high enough, really high when enemies are under half health, healing back up to full takes no time at all, and in general, Merciless is the most fun gun in the game to use with these 2 classes. It would be a perfect hybrid build if they hadn't literally killed all bleed for an entire section of the game. Still gonna put it on the list though because I love the playstyle and just avoid that DLC at all costs anyway. If you want Ravager's Mark to work as an amulet, then this feels like a great way to do it. My good buddy the Fiery Fiend here is for those who actually prefer burning to explosions. Ritualist as Prime will grant the best boost to status damage and allows for statuses to be spread on kills. Archon is secondary for mod damage and generation. Tranquil Heart is hard to get away from on Misty Step builds as it immediately regens your health on dodging. And then your main gun is going to be Sparkfire. Talisman of the Sun is going to boost all fire and burn damage. Shadow of the Misery boosts all status damage by 20%, which is a very high boost. Black Spinal Ring has become impossible for me to take off recently as it makes healing so easy as long as you deal a little bit of status damage. Ring of Omens grants us our dodge, and Firestone will not only boost fire damage for us, but increase fire defense as well. Important, if you can't tell, because this is a Firestorm build. You're going to be spawning a fire tornado on your target and watching them die from it. As simple as that, really. Starshot is really handy on builds like this, mainly to clear away a large crowd instantly, or deal with mechanics like Annihilation's orbs. But you won't really be using it all that much. Mainly, you'll be shooting Sparkfire, which deals very nice fire damage here, spreading that to everything in the world. Then with Maelstrom as your mutator, a mere 4 shots at most grants you Fire Tornado all the way back. Misty Step actually helps you keep away from the fire, and not taking the full amplitude trait is a good idea. This way the tornado does basically the same thing, and it's not going to consume you every time. Obviously, Kinship is a must, no way around it, and I would recommend ammo reserves as shotguns run out of ammo very quickly. However, do not take the trait that increases mod duration. You don't need it at all because we can regen the thing so fast. I like this build because it's incredibly easy to heal up in seconds, and Fire Tornado plays the game for you. Another time I'm gonna say maybe no team play with this one, but if you hate your friends, give it a go, I guess. A variation of a different build I already did is the Grey Captain 2.0. I still prefer the original version of myself where I used Gunslinger, but Hunter can work instead very easily. So the idea here is we have Warden as Prime for as much shield as possible. Hunter as secondary is going to boost our weak spot damage. The Paper Heart's going to get us down to gray health range, activating all our buffs. And while I use the Black Maw here for consistency, the Plasma Cutter absolutely beams down bosses. It is without a doubt one of the highest possible DPS options range builds have. But if you use it, you will want the 2.0 version here instead of the original. Canine Keepsake greatly boosts damage, crit, and crit chance, instantly letting you deal with enemies easily. Painless Obsidian grants haste and bulwark because gray health is active. Zania's Malice grants a large boost to weak spot damage pairing up with the Hunter class. Ring of the Damned increases all damage because of gray health, and lastly again we have the Ring of Omens. You do need to have the Insulator Mutator on your main gun to keep shield supported, and you won't want to take damage over and over or your shield can't protect that gray health. But shield can be more effective than health most of the time, letting you use a DPS weapon like the Plasma Cutter on a more hybrid setup. In general, this amulet is super strong, and there's plenty of ways to utilize it for sure. But if Black Maw isn't your thing, here's a version of the Grey Captain you good old Plasma Cutter fans can make use of. Alright, so we officially used every Misty Step amulet in Remnant 2 except for the Necklace of Flowing Life. What this does is increase gray health conversion and grants mod generation when gray health is converted. Unfortunately, the way you use this item is simply not enjoyable to me in any way. It relies on taking damage, healing that up quickly, and shooting out mods as fast as possible. However, Archon builds already have good mod regen, at least the good Archon builds do, so this feels completely pointless and actually harder to use. One build I saw had you stand inside Fire Tornado tornado the entire game, and that was it, which is not engaging to me at all. So in my opinion, this is the only bad Misty Step amulet, and it can't make any top builds, although you could surely be creative with it if you really wanted to. But if you know more about this, then do be sure to comment it down below so people can check it out. Other than that, you now have 10 new builds that all use Misty Step, all tank like the best of them, and all work on Apocalypse. Good luck hunting down those bosses, and hopefully now that re-rolling legendary prisms is available, I'll have a good one for the next video. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.